William Scott and Alexander Cassatt had a dream to bring the railroad all the way down the eastern shore and have the rail cars towed across the Chesapeake Bay to link up with routes north and south in Norfolk. After meeting the challenges and the engineering feat, the railroad opened in 1884. A marshy area with a mud hole was chosen as the terminus of the Nipponin Railroad. The mud hole was dredged, the harbor formed, and in 1883 it was named Cape Charles City. Before the hump was built over the tracks in 1912, there was a railroad crossing at the south end of Fig Street, complete with a gatehouse and gatekeeper, which was the strong man of the Eastern Shore, John Half, who worked there up until shortly before he passed away in 1909. In 1898, two former railroad employees, Frank Heckel and E.M. Kellogg, formed the Heckel and Kellogg Ice Company, first an ice house, then later an ice plant. Rayfield's Pharmacy now occupies the location of the old Heckel and Kellogg ice plant. This Spanish colonial revival, called the Kellogg Building, was built in the 1920s by E.M. Kellogg on the former site of his father's home on Fig Street. It was mainly used by the automotive industry as a dealership and repair. The Auto Fountain Purell Service Station, as it was known around 1930, was at Mason Avenue and Peach Street, and it is now Peach Street Books. Peach Street between Mason and Randolph Avenues was Cape Charles's Motor Mile or Gasoline Alley. Fitzhugh Auto occupied this location from the time it was built until 1921. The building was also home to the fire department from 1924 to 1931 when the Municipal building was finally completed. Note the Standard Gas and Oil Company located to the right. The building is now referred to as the Old Firehouse. It underwent a complete renovation in 1999, and it is now a fabulous space which is open for rentals to private parties and events. It was built by Charlie Parsons in 1910. In 1921, Charlie Parsons contracted the Pusey and Morris Company to build this Spanish colonial revival brick building. As soon as it was completed, the Eastern Shore Motor Company moved in. They were dealers for Overland and Haynes automobiles. The 300 block of Mason Avenue was short, but with a storied past that included riots, brawls, murder, and a brothel. The brothel is visible about midway photo next to the 76 sign. The brothel is the white frame building on the right, which was a saloon, pool hall, and brothel, owned and run by Laura Lewis, who moved here in 1885 and bought Lot 603, had the building built, and applied for an ordinary license. This is all that's left of Laura Lewis's brothel, the concrete pad showing the corner entrance. Laura Lewis was a very brave woman, an African American who came here from Norfolk after her husband had passed away. They had ran a similar business in Norfolk. Legend has it that a lady of the night and her John built this 1913 Sears kit house behind the brothel as their love nest, but their relationship dissolved before they could live together. By the 1910s, Laura Lewis had made enough money to have a house built on Madison Avenue, where she lived until 1931 when she became ill and went across the bay to the Dixie Hospital in Hampton, where she died, and was then buried in Norfolk. Laura Lewis moved here with a relative, Eliza Purdy, who was the cook in the Ordinary. After Laura Lewis's death, Dewtell Joines took over the property and opened the Palm Tavern, and later Seafood Headquarters. He ran his business up until his death in 1987. There were only 2 businesses at this location in 100 years. The 300 block of Mason Avenue is home to some unique retail shops and an authentic Italian restaurant. The first building built by someone besides William Scott was a tavern in 1884 at the present site of the Lemon Tree Gallery. In 1885, Tom Parsons bought it, added a restaurant and clothing for watermen. 1887 to 88 was the height of the lawless period in Cape Charles. There were many taverns, dance halls, gambling houses, and other attractions to lure watermen and transient railroad workers in. An August 1887 newspaper states that there was trouble between watermen and young men of the town, and the watermen threatened to come back and wipe out the town. They returned with crews of several vessels, and a row started in Parsons' barroom. Sergeant Kellogg was knocked down by William Edwards, leader of the watermen, and they returned to tear down houses and kill officials. A shootout ensued, and 6 or 7 watermen were wounded and 5 arrested before the party set sail. The original building burned in 1891, and another was built that year. This has always been a gathering place for socializing in the cultural arts. Tom Parsons ran an opera house upstairs in the late 1800s and early 1900s. It was used for lectures, dances, school commencements, and plays from an occasional stock company. Civil unrest was still a problem in the early 1900s. Extra police had to be hired for Saturday nights and holidays. In this local opinion vote taken on for January 1906, the town voted to discontinue the selling of intoxicated liquors, and bars were given 30 days to close down. In 1922, the Savage and Blasingame drugstore was operating in the old Parsons Ballroom building. On August 16th, during the Great Railroad Strike of 1922, a well-to-do citizen acting as a railroad spy shot and killed the leader of the strike after an argument ensued in front of the drugstore. Since 1997, the Lemon Tree Gallery and Studio, Gear, and Experimental Film of Virginia are housed in the old Savage's Drugstore and Palace Theater buildings. W.B. Wilson bought out L.E. Mumford's dry goods store in 1894, and it became Wilson's department store. The 3rd floor was added in 1916. The painted brick sign for Wilson's department store is still visible. At Altitude Gallery now occupies the 1st floor retail, and there are condos above. Middle of photo is the Cape Charles Bank, established in 1912 with a white facade and a set of steps leading up to protect the safe from being pulled out the door in case of a break-in. After the bank left the building, the white facade was removed. Businesses that occupied this building were Brown's Department Store, Jones Department Store, and currently the Cape Charles Coffee House. And next door to the right was Griff's Restaurant. The white facade from the bank was dumped in the bay at the north end of the beach. Many years later, an architect from Philadelphia worked hard to fish all the pieces out and laid them in his yard here on Harbor Avenue. Watson's Hardware is a Cape Charles landmark built in 1921 as W.B. Wilson's Cape Charles Hardware. It's had a couple of owners over the years, but has been owned and run by the Watsons for many, many years. The former McCarthy Hotel, 200 block Mason Avenue. Currently, the Hotel Cape Charles occupies this space. The Radium Theater opened in 1922 and closed in 1960. The Radium Theater building as it looks today in the 200 block of Mason Avenue. The Parsons Building, built by R.A. and J.R. Parsons in 1921. Mert's Restaurant was in this building and did a very good business when the trains and ferries were running. There was also a hardware store here. The renovation is almost complete. This brick commercial building was built in 1921 and housed many businesses over the years, including the Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, the Army and Navy store, currently Brown Dog Ice Cream, and Coldwell Banker. At left, the Farmers and Merchants Bank building. The Arlington Hotel was moved to make way for the construction, 1921. Farmers and Merchants Bank, established by W.B. Wilson, now houses the Cape Charles Memorial Library. The L.E. Mumford Banking Company, established in 1895, had this bank built in 1907. It's a colonial revival building, and an Irish pub is currently there. Cape Charles Ice and Lumber moved to the 100 block of Mason Avenue from the south side of the harbor. R.D.L. Fletcher, co-founder of the Cape Charles Ice and Lumber Company, president of Cape Charles Bank and Cape Charles Realty Corp. From Accomack County. 1 Mason Avenue. The right side of the structure was the original residence of R.D.L. Fletcher, built around 1910. Fletcher died in 1937. J.A. Mister and his wife bought the Fletcher residence from the estate and added the west wing. A February 1938 newspaper article boasts that the hotel has 30 rooms, some with private baths. It opened around 1939. The hotel had several owners over the years. When the trains and ferries stopped running in Cape Charles, the town fell on hard times. The hotel catered to extended stays, and there are tales of some pretty colorful characters who lived there. In 2015, the Walker family purchased the hotel and began an extensive 3-year renovation. The hotel opened in May of 2018 as a boutique hotel with a gift shop that features Virginia-made items. The Widow's Walk commands spectacular views of the Cape Charles Harbor and the Chesapeake Bay. The Peninsula Ferry Corporation occupied this spot at the north end of the beach from 1930 to 1933. Afterwards, there was a beach casino, dance hall, snack bar located here until 1952. The Cape Charles High School, 1912 to 1987, now home to the Cape Charles Lofts. The Monroe Avenue School, built in 1893. The Monroe Avenue School, as it looks today, 600 block of Monroe Avenue. W.B. Wilson gave this home to his son, James Wilson, and his wife as a wedding gift. It's located at the corner of Tazewell Avenue and Peach Street. It is currently operated as the Bay Haven Inn. Gray's Funeral Home, the African-American funeral home established in 1895 by Mills Gray, still in operation today by Tom Godwin. Godwin's father, Thomas Godwin, laid a lot of the concrete sidewalk in Cape Charles, and his name is engraved in a lot of the sections of the sidewalk. Home of E.M. Kellogg, co-founder of Heckle and Kellogg Ice Company. The residence of W.B. Wilson of Wilson's Department Store. Fig Street, currently the Fig Street Inn.